Bard on the Plains podcast with Mike McPeak. It's about stories, mine and yours.
I've been the custodian at the high school for nearly 9 years. I've set up the gym for a number of different events. There's been homecoming, coronation, snow queen pageants, prom, and of course sporting events. This is a small Midwestern town, so basketball is king. I understand the sports thing. I just don't care for it that much. It seems to me like a lot of money is spent for a small group of people with almost no return on investment. But it's not my decision to make, and I put just as much effort into sports as I do for the groups that I don't think get as much respect, such as music and arts. And there are also community events. There's the farm and home show, ladies' night out, and funerals. Funerals have been the most interesting and enlightening. When the service is too big for one of the local churches to handle, they'll come to us. I've helped with 3 funerals since I've been here, each memorable in its own way. The first was a few months after I started at the school. She was a lady in her 20s that was killed in a car accident a few miles outside of town. She was the first professional female motorcycle racer from South Dakota. It was a very sad but also a very unique event. The television station from Sioux Falls was there. There was an equal mix of people in suits and motorcycle leathers with piercings and tattoos. Her motorcycle was on display along with her racing suit and awards. The whole length of the stage was flowers. After the service, there was more flowers than the family knew what to do with. They were giving to the nursing homes and assisted living centers in town, and there was still plenty left. The rest were taken to nursing homes in Watertown. But then her mother got up to talk about her daughter. She was told about how the whole family rode motorcycles. Before any of the kids were allowed to ride, they had to be able to pass a test. They had to be able to start it by themselves, ride it from the house to the machine shed, park it, and pick it up if it falls over. She was one of the youngest of their kids to do it. I worked closely with the funeral director to help make sure that everything went well. She taught me a lot about setting up for a funeral and making sure that things go smoothly. At the time, I didn't know how important that would be later. The next was a man in his 70s. He had a love of sports, and the family wanted to celebrate that by having the basketball hoop above the altar lowered. The Catholic priest who was conducting the service had a different idea. He didn't want that interfering with his service that he was conducting. So here I was caught between the funeral director, not the one from the previous story, and the priest. Finally, I told the two of them that I'm just here to do my job, you guys figure it out. The priest won, the basket was raised, and peace was restored. Then there's those ironic twists in life that life has a tendency to hand out. The funeral director from the first story was a few years older than me. She has a son that was about 21 years old at the time. I met him a few years before through my son, who came home and said, "Dad, there's a guy in town who's setting up a computer shop. You need to go over there." Now, me being the computer nerd that I was, couldn't pass up the chance. So we started talking. We got along really well, discussing Linux and computers and operating systems. He built a computer for me, and he taught me about building Hackintoshes. He was about half my age, but him and his friends included me like there was no difference. My son and I would ride our bikes over to the shop, which was in a room off the garage of the funeral parlor, which also happened to be their home. And we'd stay there late into the night talking computers, just having a good time. A couple of years later, when my son was a senior, him and his friends decided they were going to have an all-night LAN party over at the shop. It was kind of their last hurrah before graduation. The funeral director, who was a diabetic, had a stent put in a few days earlier, but she said, "Yeah, that's all right." The computer kid was their only son and liked to have other kids around the house. My son called that night and said that they were having a good time. The next morning he called to say that the ambulance was there and they were taking the funeral director to the hospital. Her son had come upstairs and he had found her, and she was having a hard time catching her breath. My son said that him and his friends, they were going to wait in the shop until they heard how she was doing. I think they wanted to be near each other because nothing like that had ever happened before. A while later, he called back to say that she hadn't made it. So the sad irony was that somebody had to plan the funeral for the funeral director. Her colleagues in the business took care of the arrangements, and I was there to set up the gym. I told her son that she'd trained me well and not to worry about anything. She loved the jitterbug, and during the service we were told that she wanted people to dance at her funeral. There were people on the stage dancing, and anyone in the audience that wanted to was encouraged to join in. So my daughter and I did a little dance beside the bleachers. It seemed like the best way to remember her life. You can see that there are plenty of things I have to do in my job. Some of them that I'm required to do, and others that I'm honored to do. But they're all the experiences that shape a person's life and gives us a better understanding of ourselves.
If you have a story you'd like to tell, contact Mike on Twitter at @BardOnThePlains or by email at bardontheplains@gmail.com. For more information about the stories in this podcast, visit bardontheplains.com.